welcome to another video here on the Critical Focus channel. First off, a big shout out to all my members who support my work and keeps the paint flowing and the electricity running. Members do get access to the member Discord, will influence the content, the matchups, whatnot. There is a join button below if you feel so inclined. But regardless, I am happy for your support in the form of actually just watching the video, of a like and a comment, and if you haven't already, please do feel free to subscribe as well. And if you are looking to buy Warhmmer merch, there is an affiliate link in the video description as well. Let's get on with the video. Hello everyone and welcome to this Warhammer Underworlds rules update video. So I'm gonna divide this video into 3 chapters. First one is called What's Gone, the second one is What's New, and the third one is called What's Changed. So hopefully that will be clear enough for everyone to follow along. First up, What's Gone. Let's start with the big ones. There are no more warband decks, no faction cards. Those are gone and replaced with the War Scroll, which I will go into detail in the What's New part of this video. This of course also fundamentally changes how deck building works, with Rivals format now simply meaning you pick a universal rival deck, while Nemesis means that you pick 2 universal rival decks rather than 1 to mix with your own. The stipulation on the Nemesis format there is that you can't choose 2 decks that both contain a plot card, which at the moment is a pretty minor thing as there is currently only 1 deck with a plot card. Gone are also the magic dice, a bit of a bummer for me who chose my channel name based on those symbols, but after consulting my member Discord, I'm not changing the name anytime soon. And as a direct effect of that, also the Gambit spells are done away with. We still think that magic will be represented in other ways, such as abilities on War Scroll cards belonging to warbands with a magic theme. Gone is also the 2-board setup, which also completely changes the pre-game sequence. More on the new boards or board in the What's New chapter. Gone is also the innate crit for deploying first, and on that point, roll-offs with 4 dice is also done away with. Now replaced with the 1 die roll-off, which I will go into more detail later on. Gone are also reactions, in many cases replaced by the new search abilities. Long, unwieldy reaction chains are now a thing of the past. Gone are also lethal hexes. The solid red border on the new boards are, confusingly enough, stagger hexes. Gone is also the trapped condition. No longer need you worry about accidentally putting yourself in a subpar position, giving your opponents that pesky extra success. Gone is also knockback, which really was a rather minor weapon effect, mostly present on some big burly fighters. Gone is also spent glory. Now you simply make sure that the total cost of your upgrades on your surviving fighters is equal or less to your total glory. Fighters who are taken out of action, which is now called slain, discards their upgrades upon death, and thus freeing up some of your glory again. Gone is also the scatter token present in previous boxes. Gone is finally also the relic and the championship format. At least it's not mentioned in the rulebook at all. This was very expected given the Nemesis format being the more frequently played and widely embraced format of later years. What's new? The big one up front, the War Scroll card, is a huge change, of course, with a set of abilities tied to your warband. Some are search abilities, which means immediate or reactionary abilities. Some are core abilities, more on what that means later on, and most of them have a limit to how many times you can use them. Some are once per game, some are once per battle round, etc. This effectively replaces the warband deck, but aims to still keep that warband identity earlier so present with the warband deck. This is a huge deal for the community and will in some cases lessen the warband identity, but also in some cases increase it, but suffice to say, it is a huge shift that have stirred up some emotion. On the right side of the abilities, there's a neat little slot for you to mark your used abilities with a generic token to keep track of your resources. Underdog. This is a mechanic adopted from AOS and Spearhead, although I would argue it's less impactful here. Simply whoever of the 2 players have less glory is the underdog. It's not something decided at the start of a round and then gets to stick until the round ends. It rather shifts as soon as one of the players have less glory than the other. So it can shift, just like the primacy token did before, several times during the course of a round. Some cards may state that the underdog gets an extra effect on a power card, such as healing potion, or an easier condition to score an objective. It also affects roll-offs. In the case of a tie, priority will go to the underdog. The board The 2-board setup is gone and replaced with a single board setup. In the core box comes a single board with 2 sides. The winner of the roll-off chooses the side and the orientation. Core abilities. That basically means all of the actions that takes up an action step to do, previously known as activation step, such as move, charge, attack, guard, etc. And talking about those, there's a new one here as well, focus. Previously, you could spend your action step, to draw a power card or draw and discard an objective. Both of those options have now been replaced with the new focus core ability that lets you discard however many cards, both objectives and power cards you want, and then draw replacements for all of those cards, and then on top of that, 1 extra power card. That also means that you could still opt to discard 0 cards and simply draw the extra power card. Pretty neat, and this is done to lessen the chance to have a bricked hand, a boring game, and keep the game flowing better. Overrun. This is a new ability you can trigger after the drive-back step when you roll more crits than the defender to effectively move into the space they previously occupied. It also works if you slay the defender. You can also move into the space the defender occupied before being taken out of action. Stand fast. This is an effect you can trigger when you roll more crits in the defense than the attacker to negate driveback and reduce the damage by 1. This may be very confusing, as that sounds like something that would just equate a failed attack previously. But if you have heard nothing about the new crit rules before, bear with me. It is coming in the What's Changed chapter real soon, and I'll explain it more there. Brutal. It is a new weapon effect that ignores support in the defense role. The names of the support symbols have changed also, by the way, but more on that later. Grapple. Another new weapon effect that lets you push instead of driveback in the driveback step. A driveback was a push obviously, but it had the stipulation that you had to push away. With a grapple, you can basically push the defender into any hexes adjacent to where they were previously standing. What's changed? I'll take it in the order they appear in the rulebook. First up, the pre-game. First, you draw your hands. This is a change obviously, while previously it was done after the tokens were placed. Redraw is similar to before with the mulligan and all that, with a slight change here that you don't need to show your opponents the discarded cards. You don't place them face up anymore. Roll-offs. Roll-offs are now done with a single die, and here's the order of importance. In the case of a tie, as stated earlier, underdog wins. First, you roll off 4 boards, with the winner choosing a board and a side and the territory as seen here. Then the tokens are placed like previously, with the numbered side face down. By the way, they are no longer called objective tokens with the numbered side faced up, but rather treasure tokens, as to not confuse them with objectives in your deck, with the other side of the tokens still being cover hexes, and still giving you full support if you have them with a cover side up. The player that did not place the board and orientate the board starts with placing the first token, and the first token has to be placed in no man's land, which is actually not called no man's land anymore, it's called neutral territory. Then the player takes turn to place tokens with the same caveats as before. At least 2 empty hexes must separate all tokens, no tokens in edge hexes, starting hexes, stagger hexes, or blocked hexes, with the added rule that after all tokens have been placed, at least 1 token must have been placed in each of the player's territories. The last token may still be placed in an edge hex if no other hex is possible. Then the deployment takes place without a roll-off. Simply start deploying fighters, taking turns, with the player that placed the last feature token starting, basically the player losing the board roll-off. Then simply roll off for initiative with 1 die without any innate crit like before, for completing your deployment first. And talking about the roll-offs for initiative, there is a new addition to this sequence that whoever loses that roll gets to immediately draw an extra power card. And that is a thing that happens regardless if the winner chooses to let the other person go first or not. It simply is a matter of who wins the roll. And that is something that's going to be for all of the rounds, not only the first one. And while talking about roll-offs, here's a minor change as well. The name of the symbols has changed. Say goodbye to Smash and Fury, say hello to Hammer and Swords, which I think pretty much all of you said anyway. At least I did. And also let's wave goodbye to single supports and double supports, and say hello to flanked and surrounded. I'm not personally crazy about this last change. I think surrounded sounds a lot like the old trapped condition that doesn't exist anymore. I'm probably mostly gonna stick with the old terms for those. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, crits. Crits are no longer the omnipotent beast of the past with negating an infinite amount of regular successes with a single pesky roll of a crit. Nope. Crits are now simply a regular success, with the added effect of triggering overrun and stand fast as previously mentioned, as well as some abilities triggering on crits like crit grievous, for example. But as far as successes goes, it's now far less of a swingy deciding factor, which I think most people can agree on is a good thing. Stagger and guard tokens. Stagger and guard tokens still very much works the same way as individual effects, but they don't simply negate each other like before. You can now both have a guard token and a stagger token at the same time, meaning your opponent will still be able to get that reroll on your fighter with a stagger token, while you will also benefit from counting both blocks and dodges as successes in your defense roll, while also negating drive back, of course. Weapon effects. You can no longer stack weapon effects. If your weapon has several effects, such as both grievous and cleave, for example, you now have to choose what effect to apply on the weapon when you choose that weapon to attack with. This will make voltering fighters into super accurate, dangerous beasts a lot harder, and I think that's a good thing. Slain. Slain is a new word for being taken out of action, and it means two things it didn't previously. 1. When you are slain, uninspire that fighter. 2. When the fighter is slain, remove that fighter's upgrades, or rather discard those upgrades, which will then inherently also free up glory for the upgrade costs on your surviving fighters. Bounty. Previously, fighters between 1 and 4 wounds, now called health by the way, were worth 1 glory, and fighters with 5 wounds or more, previously known as large fighters, no longer a thing, were worth 2 glory. This is now done away with. Instead, your fighter cards will specify how much glory your fighter is worth when they are slain. Upgrade costs. Upgrades are now not all 1 glory. We did have the illusion upgrades, that was a special kind of beast, but let's forget about those. Upgrades now have, just like the bounty specified on the fighter cards, a specified cost. Usually a number between 0, like great speed, or 2, like great fortitude. And most will still be 1 glory, but we have those outliers. I talked earlier about how the accounting works for paying for your upgrades as well. Delve, just like before, you get staggered when you delve, and each warband can still only delve once per power phase. However, previously a staggered fighter could not delve, and this is, at least as far as the rulebook goes, no longer a restriction. You might still delve if you have a stagger token, you simply get another one. This might be something addressed in an errata later on, or this might also be very much as intended. But let's keep our eyes peeled if there is an errata down the line. Raised fighters. A raised fighter will now have a bounty of 0. This is a huge shift, of course. So no longer will it be as lucrative to farm those poor petitioners. And to note also that a fighter who has been slain is also uninspired. Another thing that's changed and not mentioned in the core rulebook, at least I couldn't find it, but they have mentioned it in the stream, I believe, is that cards will no longer affect specific ranges of attacks. Instead, the attacks as noted on the fighter cards will be categorized in either melee or ranged attacks, similar to what we have in Warcry, for example. And then cards will affect attacks that are either melee or ranged attacks, and I think that's a pretty neat way of doing it. I think previously we had cards like affecting only range 1, for example, easily being mixed up to also work on range 2, and I think this is just a way smoother and cleaner way of doing it. That is for now all I've been able to find. There is also some like terminology changes to round numbers being battle rounds and stuff like that, but I figured those were rather minor, so I just kept them out. I'm surely missing a ton of stuff here, but I still hope this was very helpful for you all and will have you getting into the swing of things a lot faster. Make sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.